Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. All right, well, 2022 is going to be a critical year for America. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, along with their nearly 2 million members. The fight to stop out-of-control spending in the president's Build Back Better scheme is far from over, and Congress is plotting more legislation that could hurt our seniors. The midterm elections will be a battle for freedom versus socialism. Unlike liberal groups, AMAC is America's conservative, action-oriented 50-plus organization fighting hard every day here in Washington and across the nation for our seniors. So I'm urging you to choose AMAC now. You will receive all of the great membership benefits, including AMAC discounts on hotels, travels, and restaurants, and your membership will support your conservative values. So go to amac.us/Ellis. That's amac.us/ELLIS to become an AMAC member now.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and so much has happened since last week, since we last talked. Of course, we had the memorial of 9/11 yesterday, which, of course, is one of the most profound moments in American history that really just emphasized the need for all of us to come together and understand what it means to be an American, what it means to defend our national sovereignty, what it means to come together with an understanding of why we need to secure our border. I mean, so many things that we can learn from that experience, of course, paying tribute to the almost 3,000 lives that were lost on that day. I was only 16. I remember that day very clearly. I was interning for the Colorado Lieutenant Governor's office at the time. And, this was back before there was any security, any of the metal detectors, any of that. You could just walk into the state capitol. I mean, that seems probably completely bizarre and foreign to us, and certainly to any of the Gen Zers who don't remember really a time before 9/11. And, of course, we completely pay tribute and respect and honor to the people who sacrificed their lives and also worked so hard that day. My good friend, Rudy Giuliani, of course, Bernie Kerik, who was the police commissioner at the time, two individuals I've gotten to know very well and had an opportunity, of course, to work with on the aftermath of the 2020 election. So all of that was a deep moment in American history and a good remembrance yesterday. Of course, we still have the ongoing issue of, of President Trump and fighting for this special master. And we'll get into that more later this week when we have the judges ruling on who she is going to appoint as special master. The DOJ and President Trump, just by way of quick update, they have said that they've both filed their recommendations for who a special master should be. And then the judge will take that into consideration. A couple of things on that. So why isn't this judge just saying that she'll review it? I mean, she may not have time. She may not want to be the arbiter of that and actually, appointing someone who's totally independent. But of course, the judiciary is independent. So she probably will set a third party. But she also could have a compromise and designate one person from the DOJ and one person that Team Trump recommends, and then any disputes between the two special masters, she could arbitrate and say, okay, I'm going to rule this or that way on whether a privilege is invoked. But the bottom line is that when the DOJ is appealing this decision to appoint a special master, it completely undercuts and totally goes against what Merrick Garland said that he wanted in terms of the Department of Justice's transparency. So what really are they thinking with this? Because of course, with how siloed politics has become, everyone who is so anti-Trump is completely fine with it and they're not seeing the hypocrisy. And everyone who's totally for Trump isn't going to see anything other than what would be in Trump's best interest. But we have to look at this, how the rule of law should be unbiased. So as this case progresses, how the DOJ's appeal progresses, how special master appointment, obviously we will discuss all of those things on the show, and I anticipate we'll do a show on all of that later in the week as we get more and more involved. But then the other thing that happened last week, of course, that had worldwide impact was the death of Queen Elizabeth II. And this brings to a close the second Elizabethan era. And it was not lost on me at all in listening to now King Charles III, of course, her son, who is now ascended to the throne, how he, in his very first public speech, remembering his mother, the Queen, how he invoked a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet in remembering her and saying, "May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." That's actually one of my favorite quotations in Hamlet in Shakespeare. I loved Shakespeare. I took an entire class in college on Shakespeare and just love the whole poetry and the stories and all of that with Shakespeare. But the reason why that to me was just very profound is because this closes the second Elizabethan era. The first, of course, was when Shakespeare actually wrote all of his plays and his sonnets back with Queen Elizabeth I. And so if you look back over English history and you look at the reign of this particular queen that spanned over 70 years, which was the longest of any British monarch. And there have been statistics online saying, how if it was 14 presidents, I don't know how many prime ministers, U.S. presidents, of course, and, how many significant moments in world history this queen saw. She, of course, came to the throne during World War II. So her first British prime minister was Winston Churchill. And then the last, of course, was just several days before she unfortunately passed, which was the newest prime minister of England. And so, just this incredible span of history. And history is so important for us to recognize and not just kind of myopically and self-centered on the United States. I think it's interesting how so much of our mainstream media is so self-centered on America that we don't get a whole lot of foreign policy, a whole lot on the news. If you go to the UK or you go anywhere in Europe, they cover a lot more expansive of news of the day and what's going on around the world, not just here in America. And I think a lot of times we're so egocentric here in America, it's almost like no matter what else happens in the world, doesn't matter unless it relates somehow to us and what our views are on foreign policy and all of that. And we would be very remiss if we didn't take a moment to recognize, of course, the Queen of England's passing and the significant moment. And of course, my heart goes out to her family with the loss of a grandmother, of course, with William and Harry. I lost my grandmother back in 2006, and it was very heartbreaking and traumatic experience to lose someone that you're that close to, and obviously they are. So from a family perspective, but then also from a world history perspective, because today actually in the United States kicks off Constitution Week. Of course, we all know and celebrate the 4th of July and the recognition of the Declaration of Independence, but an even just as important holiday and recognition and moment in the United States is Constitution Day, which every year is September 17th. And it's our federal observance that recognizes the adoption of the U.S. Constitution and typically those who have become U.S. citizens through our constitutional process of a uniform process of immigration and naturalization. So it's normally observed on September 17th, and that day in 1787, that delegates to the Constitutional Convention signed that document in Philadelphia. Now, this year, with of course Joe Biden having that insanely awful speech from Independence Hall in Philadelphia, all of these things that are coming together make this week and this commemoration and recognition of Constitution Day this year, I think, even more significant. And as I was reading through pieces about the Queen and her faith in particular, this one section from an article in a UK publication actually highlighted and stood out to me what our founders actually meant by a separation of church and state, and why the First Amendment to our U.S. Constitution is so important for us to understand, not just in the context of United States history, but in the context of world history, and in fact, even in the context of British history. Because remember, it was that very Church of England that the Queen of England is a governor and overseer over, that our founders objected to, and religious liberty and religious freedom was one of the most significant issues that fostered and fomented the understanding and the resolve for our founders to declare independence and say that the British Parliament and its monarchy were infringing upon our unalienable God-given rights, and chief among them is religious freedom. And so here in America, no government office is responsible for overseeing the church in America. Church leaders aren't appointed by or accountable to government leaders. That is the separation of authority that's designated by God himself, as our founders recognized, but in our separation of powers. So we typically like to talk about separation of powers in the context of our U.S. Constitution as just between the three branches of federal government, and then, of course, federalism, which is the differentiation and the separation of powers between federal government, state government, and the powers reserved to we the people. But the separation of powers also exists between three other authorities, which are given by God to the civil government as a whole, which would include, of course, our federal, state, and local government, the church government, and then the family government. And in this article that was talking about the Queen's faith, it said this: when she became queen, Her Majesty was automatically given the role of defender of the faith and supreme governor of the Church of England, a responsibility she took incredibly seriously. Her duties included appointing archbishops, bishops, and deans of the Church of England on instruction of the Prime Minister. So think about that contrast between how the Church of England operates and how it operated back in 1776 and 1787, and how our American system of government operates today. We don't have a government agent or civil authority that tells the church who we can ordain as pastors, who our governors and our ecclesiastical authorities are in any church faith and any church authority and any church structure in America, whether it's the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, or even or Jewish communities or Muslim, I mean, any faith in America, the government does not appoint the ecclesiastical order of a church. It doesn't appoint the authorities, and it doesn't do that in any way in connection with the president, the governor of a state, or any other state and local official. And the reason for that is because our founders recognized that we, the people, needed to have religious freedom and a separation from government control of the church. Now, I was out in LA last week and filming a documentary, which I hope all of you will see when it comes out, and it's called The Essential Church. You can go to essentialchurchmovie.com, and this is telling the story of what was one of the most significant lawsuits and actually set of lawsuits in our modern era fight for religious freedom. Because what we saw in the aftermath of COVID, of course, was governors and health officials, of course, as part of the bureaucratic executive branch, and not even the legislative branch, but all executive power harnessing the pretext of COVID for emergency powers, telling the church how they had to either shut their doors and not meet at all, or how they had to observe some particular aspects of their expression of worship. Like, for example, in LA County, there was a mandate that people coming to church couldn't sing, because singing, and obviously that's part of the Protestant faith, that's part of the worship service, and the governor and the health officials at the time said, well, that's going to spread COVID, and so you can't do that. And simultaneously, and this is the key, simultaneously, when they were saying that the health impact was far too dire, they were also allowing other quote unquote essential businesses or essential entities that they, in their arbitrary and capricious view, were essential enough to society that they could stay open. Among these, in the state of California and in LA County, were strip clubs, marijuana dispensaries, big box stores like, the Walmarts and the Targets, and some of these other businesses and organizations that, in its wisdom, of course, marijuana is way more important to the state of California and access to marijuana than a citizen's access and participation in expression of their faith. And this is fundamentally antithetical to our constitutional system and design for religious freedom. And so, as we contrast this with the Queen's position as the head of the Church of England, imagine for a moment if whoever we elected as president, if Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Barack Obama or George Bush or Bill Clinton, any, regardless of party, regardless of how you feel about any of those people, if they, when they became president, became the head of the Church of America, we would all think that that's absolutely absurd, because our understanding in America of our ability to practice our faith or not, we absolutely have the ability to refrain from practicing a faith that's against our sincerely held beliefs. We know instinctively that that would just be utterly wrong, and it would be madness for the government to somehow be over the church, and not only for individuals and compelling us to how we are supposed to worship, but also to interfere with and actually control the ordination of the ecclesiastical order, our pastors, how pastors are ordained. And, there's a huge divide right now in the church, in Protestantism, whether or not women can be pastors, what exactly the Bible teaches on the ecclesiastical order, how women can or can't teach, some of those things. And those are all fair debates, but they're in-house within the context of the church's authority. And importantly, it is not for Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or Ron DeSantis or anybody else who is an elected official or a civil government official to tell the church the answer to that question. But we contrast that with England and how the Queen of England and now the King of England will be the sovereign, not only of civil society, but also of the church, and be the head of both of those spheres of authority. That's what our founders desired to separate. It's not to say whatsoever that Christians or anyone of any particular faith can't be involved in government and cannot bring elements and aspects of their faith to the government. I mean, in fact, most of our founders recognized God and were at least expressively and professed to be Christians. And they were the ones that recognized, because of their Christian faith, they recognized the importance of religious freedom. So I think this is a great moment to step back, not only in the start of Constitution Week, and I hope that all of you will observe September 17th this weekend and recognize what a beautiful, wonderful structure our Constitution is, but also be thankful that our founders in their wisdom saw and recognized that system in the United Kingdom and rejected it for a very good reason. And when we look at our First Amendment to the Constitution, when we look at the limited powers that the Constitution provides to our legislative branch, to the legislature, to Congress, to the executive branch, to the president and any federal agencies, to the judiciary, there is no power that's given to the legislature or to the executive to make any particular findings or inquire into the adequacy or conduct of religion. And that includes, and most of us would immediately think of that in terms of, okay, the government can't prohibit me from going to church. The government can't tell me I have to be a part of any particular denomination. The government can't require me to go to church every Sunday and like it does in compulsory school attendance. And if you have a delinquency of your education from K to 12, there are compulsory laws in the states that require a certain amount of schooling. Well, there aren't compulsory church attendance education laws. In fact, those were some of the first expressions of freedom in the United States, was that there was not compulsory church attendance. And we all understand that, but the flip side of that, and what is also protected in our First Amendment, is also that the government cannot compel us to speak or act or participate in any religious conduct or conduct at all that violates our sincerely held religious beliefs. So this would include anything like a cake baker who does not want to participate in the same-sex union of a same-sex couple. It would include a florist who also doesn't want to participate in that kind of solemnization of a union that, on religious grounds, disagree with. It would also include things like compulsory vaccine injections that violate a person's sincerely held religious belief to not participate in a compulsory vaccine that was developed using abortifacients and that was developed on fetal stem cells. And I believe that the First Amendment and a religious objection, a conscience objection, should extend even beyond that, even to someone who just has, for any reason, a conscientious objection to saying, I can't take an experimental injection because I don't know how that would, for example, have an impact on the reproductive system of a man or woman. And we're seeing a lot of that now come out in the aftermath of all of these vaccines, and how there's one article that reported 44% of pregnant women who took the vaccine during the height of the coronavirus ended up having miscarriages. And that was reported by an outlet. And even if it's, 4%, that is something that is so literally grave and has such an impact on those of us who respect the mandate from the Bible to have children and to have and participate in a family unit, that we should be able to object on that basis, because religious liberty in America is one of the most fundamental aspects of our ability to truly worship God and recognize and exercise the recognition of the fact that we are human beings made in the image of God. So, on this Constitution Day, on this week, and as we are seeing over the next, week and a half or so, all of the wonderful expressions and the absolutely genuine recognitions of what an amazing Queen of England, Elizabeth, was, and moving into this new era. I mean, I think most of us, in fact, probably almost no one alive today, can remember anyone else other than the Queen of England. And so seeing all of this unfold, as we're watching this, I hope that you take a moment to consider why our founders did not want the sovereign of the civil government to also be the head of the church. And as we recognize September 17th, later on this week, recognize and be thankful and perhaps even resolve to fight harder and stand up more strongly for the liberty that our founders recognized as God-given and therefore required our government to stay out of, to preserve and protect, but to say, sorry, civil government, you can't tell the church how to conduct its own business, who to ordain, what theology to teach, and who has to go to church. And all of those questions about the truth of God, we have the unique protected ability here in the United States to exercise our first freedoms, not just believe them and talk about them in the whispers of the catacombs or in the four corners and the four walls of our church buildings, but we get to freely exercise our sincerely held religious beliefs and talk about truth and who God is openly, publicly, and boldly, because our First Amendment protects our first freedoms: the right to freedom of speech, free exercise of religion, and free association, and also freedom of the press. We can write about this in publications. I can have a platform here on Salem Media and talk about it without government interference or arresting me because I'm a Christian, right? Which that's happened a lot in world history. And I hope that America does not ever get to that point, because it would be so unconstitutional. But we have our first freedoms to do what we're doing right now, which is speaking together about truth and about the things of God and about our religious freedom openly and widely on a medium, on a media platform. That is why our founders were so brilliant and why we have to continue to protect religious freedom. We cannot allow any government actor, no matter whether or not we agree with their action personally, we can never ever allow the government to overstep and to in any way be the head of the church. And we also cannot allow a warped, perverted misinterpretation of what a separation of church and state genuinely means in the context of our U.S. Constitution. So we'll talk more about the Constitution this week and also get to a few of the other headlines. But I wanted to take a few minutes today to recognize this significant moment in world history with the passing of the Queen, and why it's so significant what our founders did and how they mutually pledged their very lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to protect our right to speak together about truth. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. MyPillow is having their biggest sheet sale of the year. You all have helped build MyPillow into the amazing company that it is today. Now, Mike Lindell, the inventor and CEO, wants to give back exclusively to you, his listeners. The Percale bed sheet set is available in a variety of colors and sizes, and they are all on sale. So, for example, the queen size is regularly priced at $89.98, but is now only $39.98 with our listener promo code Jenna, Jenna. So order now, because when they're gone, they're gone. The Percale bed sheets are breathable and have a cool and crisp feel. These come with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee, so don't miss out on this incredible offer. There's a limited supply, so be sure to order now. You can call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna, or go to mypillow.com/Jenna. You can click on the radio listeners square and use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. Thank you so much to all of Mike Lindell's listeners and listeners of this podcast for making sure to support MyPillow and using our exclusive listener promo code Jenna. That's Jenna.